Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello and welcome to the Clean Library Podcast. My name is Marcus Williams and I'm here today with special guest author John B. Hammond. John is a fantasy sci-fi author on the autism spectrum. John started writing at a very young age and has taken it on as his calling in life. He places a special emphasis on lovable characters, interesting dialogue, and fascinating settings. John and his wife Audrey live at the base of the beautiful Wasatch Mountains of Utah. Welcome, John. We're so glad to have you on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Marcus.
Yeah. So first of all, we're going to jump into your two truths and a lie, and I'll read those out now. Yeah. Awesome. But I'm not gonna guess until the very end. So don't give it away as I read them. So number one, I have a pilot's license. Number two, I've flown a World War II airplane. And number three, I was 11 years old the first time I flew an airplane.
So you see a pattern.
I see a theme there. So, all right. So pilot's license, flown a World War II airplane, or you were 11 years old the first time I flew an airplane. So we'll see if we can get planes into the conversation somehow. Maybe, maybe not, but we'll see how that goes.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
So I always like planes being in the conversation. So.
Okay, perfect. So in your bio, it said that you view writing as your calling in life. So tell us how you got started from just writing as a hobby to actually writing a book and getting it published.
So I wrote a lot when I was a kid. I mean, everyone has their English classes and stuff like that, right? But
yeah,
that was the only class that I was in the advanced or AP or whatever class for was English and writing. And I did a lot of... I went to a charter school, so we had kind of a non-traditional way of doing a lot of the classes. And
yeah,
big part of that was that they gave us pretty free rein when it came to writing projects in the English class. So I had a lot of experience from there. But then I stopped doing that sometime around high school, just priorities in education shifted, and dropped it for many, many years until I had a pretty bad breakup with a longtime friend / girlfriend, complicated situation.
Yeah.
And started writing again as kind of therapy, essentially.
Okay.
And I started writing a book just based off of ideas that I had floating around for a long time. And touched it briefly once every couple months. And then showed it to my wife when we were early on dating. And she said she liked it, and then we talked about it occasionally. But then we got married 2 years ago, a little bit over 2 years ago, because our anniversary was last month. Yes. So, and we were talking about different career stuff because I had tried so many different things. In almost all of them sort of self-run, sort of business sort of things. Sorry, congested. And my wife says, well, what about your book? My book? Yeah, that manuscript thing you wrote me. I was like, that's 5 chapters, a book. That's nothing. And she said, just go for it, basically.
Yeah.
And if you want to take that and make it a career, I don't care how long it takes. I'll support you. Let's do it. And part of me was like, oh, that's newlywed talk, but we're here 2 years later with a published book, and like,
yeah,
seems to have worked. So
that's awesome. And like a lot of people don't have that they're not in a place where they can do that and focus on the writing and really work on making that a career. A lot of the people we've talked to have been, I wrote a book in my spare time because I've got another job or something. So that's really cool that you're able to do that. That's awesome.
Yeah. We really only had the ability to do it full time around last October until that's when we kind of got out of our other obligations work-wise. Yeah. But that's when I finished the book finally. So yeah.
Yes. So how in working to make that your primary vocation job, how do you schedule your days, or how do you like make that the focus of what you do? Do you have a system or a calendar that you follow?
I think the best way to describe that is I have a calendar for about everything but writing.
Okay.
um, Writing has come for me very inconsistently, where I
Hmm.
can write 400 words in a week, and then I can write 3,000 words in a day, and then 2,000 the next day, and then 2,000.
Yeah.
It's a real sprint sort of work method for me, and I'm trying to get away from that to a more consistent, but not like strictly, suffocatingly consistent
Right.
method. And my wife and I have been trying out essentially a what we call the blocks system. So an official name, whatever. But essentially, we say, okay, these are the 4-hour periods during the day that you are allowed to write, basically.
Okay.
And it's like, it's not, okay, 1 p.m. starts and you have to be writing for the next 4 hours. It's not like
Uh-huh.
that. It's just, well, these are the writing times of day. It's kind of
Okay.
more loose than a schedule thing. And it's worked really well. I'm writing my second book in the series right now, and I am about a little over a third of the way done.
Okay.
Longer book. It's actually half as. If it was the same length as my first book, I would have been over halfway done by now. So, but it's been working out well so far. And that's the thing about writing processes is they're always shifting. You're always finding 1% better way of doing it. So
Yeah, absolutely. And what works for you may not work for somebody else, but you really need to find the thing that works for you, both time wise, but also creatively,
yeah.
as you're putting together the story. So tell us about the book that you've published. What's it about?
I say it's 80% fantasy, 20% sci-fi is usually how I start the pitch. I'm
Okay.
not very good at the pitch, but I find it more situational. But
Yeah.
my wife calls it Stargate plus Princess Bride. I have begrudgingly come to accept because people seem to actually understand that comparison.
Yeah.
Basically, it's a retired Air Force pilot. She is kind of convinced she's out of the adventure game and just content to live the rest of her life doing boring stuff. But then she gets an assignment from the United Nations, and it just sounds too crazy to pass up. She gets there. They explain to her that there's a portal to another world. They think aliens or interdimensional, whatever, sort of stuff. And she leads a team through, and instead, on the other end, it's a fantasy world, and they have to kind of deal with the culture clash and the technology, magic, kind of, all this clash of different worlds colliding sort of situation. And so yeah, Stargate plus Princess Bride is fun. Princess Bride isn't what I would classify as heavy fantasy, but the
Yeah.
humor ends up. So yeah.
Okay. Interesting. So your main character's a pilot. You're a truth and a lie were flying. Clearly, airplanes are an important part of your life.
It's an inspirational thing, yeah.
Very cool. So, how did you decide that this portal would lead to a fantasy world instead of like another planet, which kind of would be the regular, the theme we've seen a lot with portals and
Yeah,
stuff.
regular.
Yeah. So, like, how did that idea come to you?
I've always liked the mixture of sci-fi and fantasy. Like anytime anyone does that in a book or in a genre,
Mm-hmm.
but it always felt like the sci-fi and fantasy elements were always kind of like intertwined with each other, basically from the get-go. Like the world was just like that, and I like stories about culture clash and exploration. And I thought, oh well, throw all those things together, and this is how I ended up with this. And so a lot of it is about exploring this big new fantasy world that all the people there know what it is and what it's like, but to the main character Alex and her team, it's like just amazing new expedition into nowhere. So
Yeah.
um, yeah.
So, how is it for you writing with a female protagonist?
It never really occurred to me. I didn't like stop and pause. I've heard some authors have done this. I've never stopped and paused and be like, oh, was it going to be hard to write a woman if I'm a man? And I know that there are some authors who have stopped and paused or have had that issue, but I've had the characters themselves floating around in my head for so long that it's not. I don't see them as much as like the structural elements of characters, if that makes sense. When you're talking about writing, you talk a lot about the mechanical and structural parts of writing, where it's like, what's your plot structure and what's this character archetype, and I don't do that with characters as much as I do with plot, and I don't do that with plot a ton either. So to me, it's not, oh, this character is a woman, and that's like one of the tags, one of the calling points of the character. It's just Alex. That's it.
Okay. All right. That's fair.
I don't really differentiate in that way. Now, that being said, my wife is always welcome to say, like, this isn't how a girl would act. Sort of situation. But then I can 80% of the time go back and say, okay, but this is how Alex would act.
Gotcha.
Your definition of what a girl would do isn't the same definition as what other girls' definition of what a girl would do.
Right. Okay, cool.
Yeah, my wife is definitely a more girly girl than the character. So,
so was book 2 always in the plans? Was the story always going to be a series?
Yeah, it was always the plan. Especially as I got towards the end of book 1, I was realizing that this is like the tutorial to my story, basically. Like, this is the basic elements, and the premise of the general premise I just gave you, and then especially the premise that the reader understands once they finish the first book, is just way too wide of an opportunity to tell stories in. That writing only one book would kind of be ridiculous in my brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. So, and I think it's fascinating to me because no matter what kind of creative person you are, whether it's writing or art or film, whatever it is, it's that process is very fascinating to me because it's so individual. Everyone is so different on how it works for them and how the characters speak to them or the art, the story. So would you be willing to talk about how your autism has impacted your ability to write or your process for writing, or how that works for you?
So it's actually funny. The last and first podcast I was on, the focus of what we were talking about when they had me on was autism.
Okay.
And, we kind of tied that into talking about the book, but it wasn't a book specific podcast. So kind of doing the reverse of what I did there, where the autism was the focus there, with the book kind of an addendum, and kind of reverse here. So that's a fun thing. Autism. It's interesting for me to say, like, how did autism integrate? Like, what was the question? Like, how you worded it again?
Like, how do you feel like it impacts your process and just being a writer?
The creative process for me.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing, is like, I there are ways that I know of how autism works in general. From just knowing research and stuff, not from my personal experience, but from research and knowing what autism in general is like. And so I can infer that's how it's affecting my process. But from my perspective, I have no idea how anyone does it any differently.
Right. Because that's just your
my default.
Normal. Right. Yeah.
Exactly. So, like, I think that I would say that generally in the positive aspects, I'm able to come up with ideas really quickly. I was going to submit for to be in the like small elite group of at the Brandon Sanderson class 318R in BYU Provo, which is essentially like a 15 person out of hundreds, or 15 people out of hundreds are selected, it's impossible to get it, basically.
Yeah.
And one of the things they said is that you have to come ready with a completely new original story to work on over the course of the class. And I had only written most of my first novel. It had to be not connected to that book.
Okay.
And I sat down and I thought, oh my gosh, how am I ever going to come up with a new idea? I have been working on this one for the better part of 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
How am I going to make this work? How am I going to just make something new up? 2 days later, I had a first chapter written and most of the story plotted out. And that's not me bragging. That's me realizing at that point, I realized like, oh, I can do this sort of thing. I just need to not get in my own head about it.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing with people with autism, is especially when they're still learning, and obviously I'm still learning, we're all still learning, but the big hurdle with autism, high functioning autism, is that you need to learn to tell yourself it's okay to not do it the air quotes normal way.
Yeah.
And in most cases, by trying to do it the air quotes normal way, you're kind of fighting with one hand tied behind your back, shooting yourself in the foot, whatever you want to say, right?
Yeah.
So I'm still constantly finding those things where I'm realizing, oh, okay, so that's not the normal way to do it, but this is what works for me, and I do it way better than other people do doing the normal way.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's kind of how I've been learning how to do writing is, and that's especially a good lesson for anyone who's writing, because every person's writing process is different.
Mm-hmm.
You can take 10%. You can look at someone else's writing process, and you can probably take like 10% of that and apply it to your own. I don't think you could just copy their writing process and it would work for you.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever heard of that happening. So,
yeah, I love that, and I think that's it's important, like you were saying, to give yourself permission to do it the way that works for you.
mm-hmm.
And there are so many courses out there, classes, experts who tell you need to do this, you need to do this, you can't be an author unless you do it this way. And I think that's discouraging to people because they think they have to fit this mold, and you don't. Do what works for you. So I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. So was there a time as you were writing that you made a conscious decision to keep your book clean, or was it a natural thing for you, or how did that work?
I don't think I have it in me to write an unclean book. It depends on your definition of unclean, but no, one of the biggest pieces of advice that I've gotten from a lot of different independent sources in going through the writing process is basically just write what you would want to read. Is kind of a big thing that they talk about, and obviously they want something that's more of a general advice. It doesn't mean word to word, but I wouldn't want to read my book if it had anything that was in kind of the non-clean categories. And I'm considering myself a clean person, so it would be pretty hard for me to write one anyway. So
yeah.
So to say I didn't set out to say I'm going to write this as a clean book and market it as a clean book, but it was never going to end up any other way. So.
Gotcha. Yeah. So we've talked about how, just the word clean itself is a pretty vague, pretty loaded word. So when I say that, like, how would you define a clean book?
Oh, that's so hard because everyone has a different definition, right?
Right.
But depending on their background, and especially, I think the general stuff is there, swearing and kind of lurid scenarios, to use some fancy wording there. But I think the main thing that people get kind of differentiating about the clean level is violence. I think that would be an argument. That's more of a sliding scale, because the other things is like presence of swearing, okay, not clean. Presence of stuff, not clean. But violence, I feel like people have different gauges for. The most violent thing in my entire book, I would say, is half of a sentence that partially describes blood, and that's like it. It's cartoon action. Other than that, basically, I mean, I'll say it's definitely less violent than Hunger Games, and that certainly seems to have been considered appropriate for kids
Yeah.
somehow. So,
Yeah. And so how do you, like, when you're going out to find books to read for yourself, i- do you have a system you use to make sure that the book you're picking up is clean or something that you would be okay with?
um, I tend to follow authors more than books.
Okay.
Like if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
Like I
totally.
trust the author, not the book. You know,
Hmm.
and I think a lot of people are like that because typically, even if an author was going to randomly switch gears and suddenly stop writing something clean, which they wouldn't do generally because then they lose their fan base a lot of the time.
Right.
But even if they are going to do that at some point, I think I'll be able to tell pretty quickly reading the book that something's different and not going to go the right way.
Yeah.
You know, um, there isn't any system. My wife and I were talking about this as we were talking about getting ready for this
Yeah.
podcast. Was I had to explain to her, there's no actual rating system for books. She's like, "You're right. No, there's no ESRB, rated T for teen. There's no PG-13. There's none of that for books," which is wild to me
Yeah.
because this infrastructure in place for books, like ISBNs and all of these different, like all the stuff that's in place for the logistics of books, is so rooted in like 150-year-old ish kind of systems.
Yeah.
You'd think that they would have come up with a system for rating books at some point in that time, especially given how old of a system it is.
Yeah. We've Brock and I, who's not here today, but generally my co-host, we've tried to research and look, and there are some attempts, like, some websites out there where they're attempting, but the problem is there are so many books
Mm-hmm.
that, each website, even if they're working full time, can't even they can't even keep up with the number of books being released, let alone the back library.
I hadn't
So,
thought.
so how, and it's something that we've discussed a lot, is how would you, if you were going to start some sort of book rating system in a way that's would make an impact, like how would you do that going back, it's it's this, and then it's overwhelming because it's this massive problem. But I think you're right. When you think about it, it's kind of crazy that it never happened. And it's almost like communities, every community in their, little library or their school decided what books were okay. And those are the books they had in their community, but there was never any wide consensus or
Yeah.
process for that. But
Yeah. I mean, they've got there's like kind of a tag system for books now, and it's all standardized. The
yeah,
ISBN has been around for ages, and it's boggling to me that you need a different ISBN for hardcover, softback, what am I trying? Hardcover, paperback, audio, ebook. All of them
yeah,
need an ISBN. There's no real good reason for that, but all these logistics are in place.
right.
Why not something to tell you what you're about to be reading,
Right, exactly.
or
uh,
if it's appropriate for a kid?
or even Amazon, had they wanted to, could have instituted some sort of, you know once kind of this whole independent authors and submission ebook, they could have instituted where in order to submit your book, you have to fill out like a content sheet with content warnings or whatever, but they
Yeah,
didn't.
yeah. It wouldn't even need to be necessarily be mandatory. I mean, it could be opt in, and then you just kind of have the advantage of being in your category, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if you just in even like a short term solution would just be adding that as a category or a genre on all these book sites would be clean fiction, because there's certainly categories for the opposite end of the spectrum.
Right.
So it's
Yeah,
like, if you can filter by that, why not filter
the
the
other
opposite?
way. Right.
Because there's going to be people who want the other way. So.
Yeah, and Amazon did fairly recently. They added a clean, I think, clean and wholesome romance
Mm.
section.
It's a step in the right
Um,
direction.
but yeah, but it's only for romance.
Yeah.
So the violence and the swearing that aren't even covered in that. So
Mm.
interesting. Yeah, and um, it would make choosing, like you said, you follow authors, but how do you find a new author that you know you can trust that first time? Like, how do you
Yeah.
become a fan of a new author? And as authors ourselves, that's our big hurdle, is finding new people to read our books, because hopefully once they read one, they'll want to read, they'll want to stick with us and read our
Yeah.
other stuff too. So
Trusting an author is a big deal. I mean, look at
yeah,
Sanderson. It's they'll follow him to any genre, you know.
right. And it's not just his undeniable talent as a writer and good stories. It's because they trust they can read what he puts out,
Yeah, they
right?
trust. He's got a track record. They trust the author. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And um, you can see how important that is, just in his crowdfunding campaigns. Like, people trust him enough that they're willing to pay in advance to help him finish new projects.
Yeah. No, it's insane. That's my number one author role model. And the funny thing is, I haven't read much of his books.
Yeah,
It's just as a career role model. You
right.
know, the way he has done his entire career is just such an amazing situation that I really, really want to study more. And I've watched. He has a ton of lectures. The entirety of his lectures are available online for free on
Hmm.
YouTube for the 2016 and 2020 lecture years that he did at BYU. And start to finish, 100% of them available for free on YouTube
That's
officially.
awesome.
And I've bored through those far too many times for me to willingly admit on public television. But it's I don't know.
I'm sh-
Studying the author is in separating it from the fandom of liking their books is pretty beneficial in my experience. So
yeah, and I mean, I can't think of another author that would be a better role model for someone who trying to make this a career. And so
hmm
that's smart. So have you are are you independently published, or did you go with a traditional publisher?
we are independently published. I I think I could just go around and do the traditional publishing thing at some point, but I just wanted to get it out. I just wanted to deal with the getting it big and successful, hopefully, later, if
Yeah,
traditional publishing is required to do that. We're hoping it's not, but if someone
yeah,
walked up and gave me a great deal, obviously I'd take it, but I'm not gonna just jump at the first thing that comes around, even if nothing ever comes around. um,
yeah.
but
So
we've had pretty great success, considering we came out of literally nowhere and have done very little marketing. uh,
that's cool.
so,
So how did you do a ton of research or read books on how to do it, or just kind of try things? Like, how did you go about figuring out how to publish?
oh, the publishing part of it.
Yeah.
We had a lot of help in the publishing part of it. We had a ton of help from a group that my family, my father writes books as well.
Okay.
Just more, he's doing it more as a hobby, but I'm trying to do it as a long term career.
Yeah.
Um, and he joined a group called Author Ready, which is kind of a free, what's the word, freemium. You can start at free, but then if you want to do more, you can pay.
Yeah.
Kind of author support group run by Richard Paul Evans,
Oh,
the
okay. Yeah.
the author for Michael Vey and Christmas Box, all those books, The Walk. And so they got involved with that. I thought, okay, I mean, how helpful could that be? And I started coming to meetings here and there, and suddenly I kind of fell in with the crowd, and they guided me all the way. I used some of their services. I'll be honest, money was paid. That's how it works.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's how I ended up with my interior. That's how I ended up with my cover, and it worked out really well for us.
Good.
They helped us through the self-publishing process as well, part of it as well. Every down from just like, is this a good idea for you or not, or all the way down to like, here's what buttons to press to put it up on the website, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So honestly, the biggest thing is that there's a ton of scams for authors, as I'm sure you're aware.
Yeah.
There's a ton of people preying on people who are wanting being a writer to be their career, and people are trying to prey on those people. And I'm glad that this didn't turn out to be that situation.
Yeah.
So,
And he's I think a big enough name that he's trusted and cares about his reputation, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even on the marketing side, I get messages all the time from on Facebook from people who pretend that they like my books or that they, you know, are interested in me as an author, and so I'll chat with them for a little bit just for fun, whatever, knowing that it's probably a scam, and then without fail, after so many conversation pieces, they jump in with, "Have you thought about hiring a marketer?" Like, there it is. There's the pitch.
You have more patience for that than I do. There. I'm like, dude, I'm just going back to writing. Come on.
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I tell myself, well, maybe this is a person who actually would be interested in reading. But, you know, you can tell really quickly when you ask them, well, what was your favorite part of the book? And
Yeah.
they don't have an answer. You're like, oh, wow, you think I'm a great author, but you don't even know the names of my books. You're just trying to sell me something.
It's like, give me 15 minutes to go Google what your book was called again. Like, so,
Right. So what do you do to get the word out there to try to market yourself?
well, we're still figuring that out. We're real fresh. I don't know how much research you did on us specifically, but I say us because I always say us. People probably get weirded out by that, but I say us because me and my wife, this is like it's an absolute tag team situation.
Yeah, that's great.
I say us. I never say me, John, the author. You know, it's not. It's our book. I say.
Yeah.
I'm just the author. But we only launched book one May 15th of this year.
Yeah.
So we're still real fresh and figuring out what to do in terms of marketing. We had to solve a lot of kinks that were happening after the release as well. The distribution stuff was being weird. The cover almost was a disaster very briefly, so that was bad. Mm-hmm. But we're now in that kind of phase where we're doing stuff like this.
Yeah.
We're trying to figure out how to get the word out there and look at being places, going to advertising. We went to our first book event a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. That was Simply Books up in Tremont, Utah. That was fun.
Uh-huh.
So we're figuring it out.
So was that like multiple author type event?
Yeah, they called it a book fair for adults, which I really liked, actually. There were 27, I think it was, other authors there.
Uh-huh.
So it was a pretty big event, especially for Box Elder County. Not exactly, Central Provo, but
yeah.
We had a lot of people. We sold like 15 books, which to complete strangers on our second try isn't bad.
That's a good day.
That's a good day, especially in-person sales, right?
Yeah.
But we're just hoping to get to as many of those good events as possible.
Yeah.
And
I've tried some of the like farmers market type thing, Christmas market type of things, and you get a little bit of traction, but they're not really book people going specifically looking for books. So like on those type of things, a few sales in a day is a good day. And I always try to balance, like, was that time worth 3 sales? I mean, is it worth, what's the cost per customer and that kind of thing? But I think that was smart, going to an event that was market it as a book thing. Like, so the people who were there for books.
Yeah, there's no doubt what they're coming in to buy, right? They have their
Right.
little budget. They brought a bag with all the books. Like these are people who are buying 10 books no matter what, no matter what's in
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah. So then your job is to, how do you stand out from all the other authors so that they buy your book?
27 authors. Exactly.
Yeah.
That
But
was-
that's cool. And we've started a kind of a local down here where I'm at.
hmm,
Um, and we had one at the beginning of the year where it was an author event, and we did, um, not only did all the authors have booths, but we also did talks so people could come in and learn about writing and
that's
our
cool.
experiences and stuff. And it turned out really cool. It was a lot of fun.
Remind me
Um,
again where you're based out of?
I'm down in Utah County, in South Utah County. So
Oh, so like Spanish Fork area or?
yeah, it's Payson, Spanish Fork.
Okay, yeah, I'm in
Yeah.
Provo, so we're not far.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Let me know
So
when. Let me know when next time that event is. Like
yeah,
seriously, I want to come to
totally.
that.
I'll send you an invite to your group too. So to our group so that you can be a part of it.
Yeah.
But I think there's a difference. And one of the things that I think is so great about the podcast is, like you said, you follow authors. And if you
Mhm.
get to know a person, whether you listen to a podcast or you meet them in person, that builds that trust that we were talking about, that
Yeah.
you're going to trust trying out their book, or because you've met them in person and you know. So I think, even so, I tell myself that even on those days when I only sell one or two books, it's still worth it because people are seeing me, getting to know
Mhm.
me, you know. So
Yeah, you never know how many books you sold after the events is over, right? Because
right.
someone might have liked your pitch and thought about it on the way home, and then they go pull up the Amazon link, and yeah,
Yeah, are they I've worked on getting a few of my books in the local library, and so who
mm.
knows, they see me at the Christmas fair, and then a week later they're in the library and see it and decide to
Everywhere
check it
they
out.
look, Marcus Williams.
Well,
Eventually,
that's the key to marketing, right? they
eventually,
they see
one
you
day,
so many places and so many times that they decide they want to check it out.
there's got to be something to this guy. I keep seeing him everywhere. So
Yeah.
that's
So
the hope, right?
do you think, speaking of just marketing and stuff, do you think there's an advantage to being a clean author in the marketplace, or do you see that as a disadvantage?
I definitely don't see it as a disadvantage because my wife and I were talking about this the other day when we were talking about the questions that you guys had given us as examples of questions that are sometimes asked on the podcast. But it was what did we start talking about? Oh, it was it was pretty similar to what you were just saying, which is an advantage or disadvantage. And
Yeah.
to me, it's definitely not a disadvantage because in my mind, clean is the default for books,
Okay.
right? At least everything starts at a relatively clean as the default. I think what I write is probably more clean,
Hmm.
but I definitely don't think the average is up here. For it's for audio listeners, I'm going up and down with my hand,
Yeah.
but I don't think the default is Game of Thrones or whatever. I don't think that is our yardstick for what is the average fantasy or fiction or whatever sort of book. I think Harry Potter is. And I think if as long as we're writing as clean or cleaner than Harry Potter, we'll be fine. That's standard. I
Yeah.
think that if you're going to cater to a very specific market, being unclean might be advantageous, but that doesn't mean that being clean is disadvantageous.
Okay.
Because that's not even including the fact that I wouldn't want to write that kind of book anyway.
Right.
So
Right.
I'm going to write what I want to write.
Yeah.
I'm writing something that's horribly unmarketable and esoteric and so niche that it could never be marketably successful, I'll do it anyway. You know?
And that's a good point, because I think sometimes our perception gets skewed because we walk into a bookstore and all the books on the front table are maybe spicy romance or whatever. So we start thinking that that's the baseline or default, and I think you're right. It's not.
Yeah, I think one of the big things about that, if my experience on trying to market the book on TikTok and Instagram, one thing I've learned is that it's not about how many readers there are for that category. It's about how many books those people in that category read a week.
Yeah.
People are some people in certain genres and audiences, they just read a lot more books than other people.
Yeah.
And I would argue, some might be mad about this, I would argue they have less of an eye or care about quality versus quantity. It's just sort of like content, you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that's why Barnes & Noble, you walk in there and it's a bunch of stuff like that, because they know that if they have 5 of those books, at least 2 of them are getting bought, you know?
Right.
So, and then the next time they come in, the other 3 are getting bought. So
Right. And their goal isn't to necessarily promote good books. Their goal is to sell books to
yeah.
make money. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. So have you thought about an audiobook yet?
Oh, we've definitely thought about it. We know we definitely want to do one. It's just a whole different beast
It is.
from doing the ebook and everything there. It's costs, a lot of costs are involved, and kind of as you know probably. But the main thing for me is I don't want to just rush and get an audiobook out. I want to do it right. I want to do it
Yeah.
like a really quality way of doing it. My wife and everyone else just keeps saying, "Well, just narrate the book. You're the author." And I'm like, okay, I have a female lead and it's entirely from her perspective. I want to have someone with at least relatively similar voice to read it, you know?
Right.
That's what I imagine the character sounds like, because it's all from her perspective. And not it's third person, but it's only her perspective, you know. So
Right. Right.
and I know that's going to be more expensive to hire someone to read it, but like I said, I want to do it right the first time. So
Yeah. That's important. And it's important that you're happy with your narrator, but also that it sounds the way that you envision it. I think that's worth waiting till you can do that. I think that's important. Yeah, for sure. So with this series, how many books is it going to be?
It's a constant surprise. um, Originally, I thought, oh, trilogies are fun. You know, that's
Mhm.
that's a nice not even number 3. And then I kind of kept thinking of what would happen after, and then book 2 got split into 2 books, and the shorter answer is I have no idea at this point.
Yeah.
And I don't know where the line between this series and another series set in the same setting. I don't know. I don't know how many books I'm going to get out of this idea, basically. I know that I have a second book a third of the way done, a third book very well thought out, a fourth book very well thought out, and a fifth book as a basic idea. So
Yeah.
maybe that's where it ends. I don't know, but
I
definitely.
read I can't even remember who it was, but it was some sort of training at one point that I watched or read that said that 5 books is the sweet spot. And I don't know if that's true. Who knows?
I
But
don't know.
his argument was for a new author, 5 books it's your kind of that 5th book where you start getting some traction anyway with readers, and then they'll go back and read your backlist, read the whole series. So that's kind of a magic number. So I'm trying it. I don't know. So my one series will be 5 books. I'm working on book 5 right now, but
Oh, nice.
but that's the thing. Like I could watch 5 videos and they would all tell me different things. 3, 5, 7, whatever it is. It always seems to be an odd number though.
Well, it's funny that even numbers tend to not be as, I don't know, what do you say, like satisfying as odd numbers are.
Yeah.
You can't make a star out of even numbers and have it not look like a sheriff badge. So,
Yeah, that just occurred to me. They're always either 3, 5, or 7. anyway, I don't know.
All the fun polygons.
Yep. Well, is there any other? I know we talked about Brandon Sanderson, but are there any other clean authors that you would recommend to our listeners?
I have a lot of author friends. I fully believe that most of them write clean. Don't know if
Mhm.
they would market themselves as that or not, so I won't speak for them. Apart from one person I know from the Author Ready group, Stephanie Fay, I believe is her. If I'm gonna be so embarrassed if I'm getting part of her name wrong. It's Stephanie Fay. Zelina and the First Glyph, I think, is her first book.
Okay.
I believe. I know she has at least two out. Maybe the third one is done. I don't remember. But she markets specifically as clean fiction, clean fantasy, the story that she wrote for her daughter, and then kind of spun out into a whole series. So
Okay. Cool.
that's another good example for people, I would say.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Well, we need to get back to your two truths and a lie. We talked about planes like for 30 seconds.
Yeah,
We
if
didn't
that.
really get into it. So, so I'm going to remind everyone what they were, and then I'll take a stab at it. I have a pilot's license. It's number one. Two, I've flown a World War II airplane. And three, I was 11 years old the first time I flew an airplane. So if one is the lie, that means they're all the lie. So that can't be it. So World War II airplane. I mean, I think if I got my pilot's license, that would be something I'd want to do. I think that'd be super cool. So I'm going to go with maybe you were young the first time you flew, but it wasn't 11. So I'm going to say number three is the lie.
Unfortunately, you're wrong.
So is it number two?
I do not have a pilot's license. You don't actually need to have a license to fly a plane, otherwise you wouldn't learn
Be able to learn.
how to
Yeah.
fly a plane. But I did fly my first airplane unassisted, not solo. There was other people in the plane, but
Right.
no, I did my first lesson learning to fly when I was 11 years old.
Cool.
I flew a World War II trainer biplane
Okay.
for my 16th birthday, up in Heber.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I don't remember the designation, but it's a Stearman, an old Boeing biplane from 1930s era that the
Sweet.
Navy would use to train pilots before they got into the big boy planes.
Yeah.
And I don't have a pilot's license because it's too expensive to do lessons. So if I'm not going to do it as a career, I am not going to do it, unfortunately.
Yeah, well, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. That was my.
Well, that's just because you were a kid. Every kid
Well,
wanted
I
to be a
mean,
pilot.
the whole motion sickness thing was not gonna. It wasn't gonna work out. But yes, I love planes. So cool. Well, I was hoping I would catch up to Brock because he's ahead in the Truth and a Lie game, but at least I didn't fall behind any further
Is there
since he's not
competition
here.
going?
Yep, we've got our little competition. This is Steve. He's our scorekeeper. Brock's at 10. I'm at 6. So, all righty. Well, cool. Thank you a lot for being on the show today. That was a lot of fun, and I learned a lot. And hopefully, the people who are listening will be motivated to go out and to find your book and to read it and to put you on their trusted authors list, so they'll read everything that you put out and become big fans.
Hopefully, I get to have them join me for more than one book if I can finish my other books.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck on the future books and in your building your career as an author. Thank you, everyone out there, for listening or watching this episode. Please follow, subscribe, and most importantly, share the podcast with your friends and family as an awesome place to meet new authors of clean books and find new books to read and new authors to follow. So thank you so much for being here today, and we'll catch you on the next episode of the Clean Library Podcast.